still got her?
Yeah.
Oh, there she is. All right, now we're good.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is a public meeting of the Indiana Arts Commission Advisory Review Panel convened to review FY24-25 Arts Organization Support Grant Program applications. This is panel 2 of 4 statewide panels scheduled to review large budget organizations. I'm Maya Michelson, Executive Director of the Indiana Arts Commission, and I'm serving as today's review panel moderator. Today is April 24th, 2023, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and we are meeting online and streaming live for applicants and the public to observe. Just as a reminder, there's to be no contact between the panel and the audience about the disposition of applications, either before, during, or after the panel meeting. This meeting will be recorded and made available upon request. At this time, I'll individually invite each of the panelists and then the IAC staff to introduce themselves. Panelists will state their name, occupation, where they're from, and staff will state their title and role. So we'll start with the panel. I'll start by introducing each of you by your first name so that you can share a little bit about yourself, including your location. And we'll start with Levon.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Levon Williams. My pronouns are he, him. I am an equity, inclusion, and anti-racism consultant to nonprofit organizations, primarily arts and culture-based nonprofits. I have a master's degree in nonprofit management and arts administration from Indiana University. I currently reside in Reston, Virginia, but was born and raised in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where I worked for the Allen County Public Library for 10 years. I'm very excited to be here with everyone.
Thanks, Levon. Dr. Terry.
Good afternoon. I'm Terry Witt-Bailey, and I currently serve as the Vice President and Chief Program Officer at the Center for Leadership Development in Indianapolis. I live in Muncie, but most of the work that I have done has been in arts administration at Cornerstone Center for the Arts as the President and CEO, as well as the Madam Walker Theater Center in Indianapolis. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Terry. Deb.
Deb Dormady, nice to meet you all. She, her are my pronouns. I'm in the Narragansett Wampanoag land of Providence, Rhode Island. I'm a longtime arts administrator, most recently served as Deputy Director at Artist Communities Alliance. I'm now at the Rhode Island School of Design, and I'm also a bookbinder.
Thanks, Deb. And Josh.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Josh Gilstein, pronouns he, him. I most recently worked as a logistics engineer at the American Red Cross, and I'm also a freelance arts administrator and talent manager based in San Francisco, California. I also have my Master of Public Affairs and Master of Arts Administration degrees from Indiana University. And I'm a musician and composer in my free time. So excited to be here today.
And where are you, Josh?
Currently in Japan, but based in San Francisco.
Fantastic. Thank you. Eric, IAC staff.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eric Ashby, he, him pronouns. I am the Grants and Research Manager for the IAC.
And last but not least, Paige.
Hi, everybody. I'm Paige Sharp, Deputy Director of Programs here at the Indiana Arts Commission, she, her, and I am here in the background to serve as guidance as needed around policy clarification.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Now we'll begin the panel review, and this is how the process will work. The panel will discuss each application, and the assigned reader will provide a summary of their review before we open up discussion with the full panel. Once the panel has completed their discussion of an application, they'll have the opportunity to update their scores. As the panel moderator, I encourage you to be conversational in your discussion. Feel free to ask questions of one another, chime in when you have a thought to add. While we want to be mindful of time and focus on the highlights, we also want to make sure that the discussion includes each of the 4 evaluation criteria: organizational excellence, artistic quality, inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, and community engagement. If one of our panelists has a conflict of interest with an application, they'll be placed in the waiting room until we're ready for the next application. But we do not have any conflicts of interest for this panel. So that's the process. Are there any questions from the panel before we get started? Hearing none, let's begin. Our first application is the Arts Council of Indianapolis. And Terry, you are the reader for that application. So whenever you're ready.
I am the reader for the Arts Council of Indianapolis. And what I would like to start is by saying that this application was very easy to read because they focused on the questions in the application. As Maya had mentioned, in the 4 categories: organizational excellence, idea, artistic quality, and community engagement. They gave examples as well as saying that they did certain things, specifically the opportunity to provide an arts guide, and they welcomed feedback, and they showed in their application how they worked with the feedback, what they did with the feedback. I appreciated being able to see the examples as well as knowing that they said they did it. But in fact, in my notes, my specific notes under organizational excellence, I said the Indy Arts Council says what they do, then they prove what they do. And that's always very helpful in reading a grant proposal to see how it's working. I also am happy to see that in terms of inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, that 70% of their grants are to Black, Indigenous, and people of color. That is something that I know that the Arts Commission is making sure that they focus on. And again, not only are they saying that they're doing that, they're proving it and giving examples of how they've done that. The most important thing that I noticed in terms of community engagement, as they do surveys and look at what people are saying about the work that they're doing, is that they welcome the feedback as they continue to support the arts community. And then they use that feedback to actually make changes. And again, in reading the grant proposal, it's always very helpful to see when someone has written it in their proposals. As artists or people that are supporting the arts, we know a lot of these organizations. So it's important to see how people are proving what it is that they're doing. And this application does that.
Thank you, Terry. Now it's an opportunity to hear from other panelists. Additional comments, observations from this application.
I can rubber stamp a lot of what Dr. Terry said there as well. I will add that in the idea section, you know, that there was a great demonstration of commitment through initiatives over time, but without having context for that evolution, it was hard to get a sense of the impact. So there was the example of 70% of, a certain grant award were going to BIPOC-led organizations compared to 40% in the previous year. That was one specific example, but there wasn't a lot for any of the other ones. So while it was a very strong section, I would say add more specificity if possible. There was one where it said add 2 to 3 appointments to our board that reflect artist, organization, and our community voices, which sounds like a good plan, but without having done the research, I don't know how many are currently on the board and who they represent. So I don't know what kind of difference that would be indicating. And then also just adding that the community engagement comments, that section to me felt the most genuine, and how it was captured there was showing a bit of an arc of improvement and understanding of community and working together to adapt organization priorities. I think, in a lot of the sections, it feels very kind of boilerplate, which I totally get, because we're all good at talking about our organizations and what they do. And this section felt very, I think, kind of, it had a certain amount of candor that I appreciated in how it captured its arc of improvement there.
Thanks, Deb. Additional comments or observations, Levon?
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on what Deb just said about the community engagement section. I found that section extremely compelling, really understanding the role that the council plays in the arts ecosystem, and really being open and responsive to feedback that they were receiving. Again, I think for me, the idea section was pretty strong. I felt like the commitment to IDEA overall really came through very, very, very effectively for me. So my 2 cents.
Thank you, Levon. Josh.
Yeah, agree with what everyone has said. I'll add for the community engagement section, agree it was very strong, loved the different ways that feedback was incorporated. One thing that did not come through as strong was the description of the mutually beneficial partnerships. They shared some of the partnerships that they have, but not as many detailed examples of how those are employed or what that mutually beneficial relationship looks like. So that was something that I think could be improved slightly in that section. And in the artistic quality, I thought that was a really great and thorough response, really had a lot of detail about artistic engagement, artist opportunities for involvement, but did get less sort of on the educational side, understanding what sort of educational opportunities are offered through the organization, and also could add a little bit more about their process for continuous improvement, but otherwise was generally strong.
Great, thank you. Any additional comments by the panel? All right, hearing none, I'll give you a couple of minutes to update your scores for this application, and then we'll move on to the next. All right, it looks like most folks are done, so we will move on to the next application, which is Dance Kaleidoscope. And Deb, you are the reader for that one, so whenever you are ready.
In organizational excellence, I thought this was a really clear, solid response. And as a logistical note, which is not, an application at all, but I appreciated that there was the corresponding ABCD addressing the components in the narrative, even though it's not as elegant if you're a grant writer, but just because we're going by a rubric, I appreciated that. But noting what it does and why it's important, with the year-round contracts and benefits for dancers and education, and that it has the capacity to carry out its work with a mix of veteran and experienced staff and performers. It seemed to have a really good understanding of and a plan for the budget challenges that it's facing. Let's see, I guess, if I was kind of nitpicking, which seems to be my job, a description of the board could have a little more specificity rather than a basic description of what the board essentially does as a nonprofit. Let's see, it seems like there's a lot of significant transitions happening in Indiana right now, and this organization is one of those. And so, this seems like a great opportunity for the organization, and they're thinking of it that way. Under IDEA, they had really good comprehensive plans. They are plans though, so I'm not sure what the commitment will be. Since the efforts generally seem to be new, it might be helpful, I thought as a tip for them to prioritize internal trainings with staff and board first, and wondering if there's a relationship to the community where the new dance center is. So that's something that stood out to me a lot, is not having a lot of context about the location of the dance center. And because it came up in a couple of different sections. This is kind of a side note, but equity seeking groups was a new phrase to me, and apparently is a Canadian thing in the research that I did about it, and is also falling out of favor in Canada. And so thinking about potentially retiring that phrase, since should all be equity seeking groups in my mind. But I liked that there was good amount of diverse choreographers represented, and that they had a really good understanding of why collecting demographic information is important. In terms of artistic quality, the response covered most aspects, expertise of those involved, clear artistic vision, inclusive plans for upcoming seasons, strategies for data-driven marketing, artistic staff now a part of programming decisions. And under community engagement, I thought the response covered what is required, but could be more thoughtful in capturing the nuances of mutual beneficiality. So with an emphasis on what is learned by the organizations. So how their policies are informed by the partnerships, rather than they have new audiences as a part of, the partnership. And again, coming up, learning more about the new location, they wrote that the goal was to share opportunities, facilitate potential collaborations, and simply be a part of the racially and economically diverse neighborhood, but not knowing anything about the neighborhood or the Ori's history with the area. I thought this section could have been stronger by demonstrating a little more care in discussing potential impact and relationship. That's mine.
Thank you, Deb. Additional comments from the panel?
I'd like to go ahead and just echo Deb's comments. Thank you so much for being so thorough. That makes our jobs easier when the first reader is doing such a great job. But thank you for that. I did not know that Dance Kaleidoscope was the longest running, most established dance company in our state. So congratulations to Dance Kaleidoscope for that. So that we want to make sure that we give credit for that. It also has, based on, again, their application, people that have served in certain capacities for a long period of time. And so there is some transitioning that's happening at the executive and at the artistic levels. So with that, it does sound like there are some things that are in the works. And so they may not have been implemented or the plans haven't been put in place. But I agree with Deb, it's important to kind of know what the plans are so that we, people that in the community, can see if it worked, whatever it is that the plan is. But hats off to this organization for the longevity of who has been there, and to the folks who are coming in to make growth, continued growth. I also agree with Deb as it pertains to the neighborhood and how is the organization connecting to the neighborhood that they are in. Yes, they're in that neighborhood and bringing people into the neighborhood, but what about the people that are already in the neighborhood, and what's that plan? So I look forward to seeing the next level and Dance Kaleidoscope 2.0.
Thanks, Terry. Other comments from other panelists? Josh.
Yes, I agree again with everything that's been said. On the community engagement front, really appreciated sort of that strong feedback loop from performances and educational offerings that they send out surveys and sort of solicit feedback each time to bring to their post-show meetings. And they have the director of community engagement, which I think is an excellent position to have for the organization. One thing that I didn't come through as strong for me that I think could be focused on is how the community engagement is incorporated into the program development and delivery beforehand. So of course they get the post-show feedback and of course that would then lead into the next show, but sort of when they're designing the offerings and the artistic material, there's some mention of like planning to interact with the community and gather input, but not as specific about how that's actually done on the upfront or initial side of things. So be looking for a little bit more of that as well.
Thank you, Josh.
Just had one comment here, just to kind of wanted to double click on Deb's comment from earlier about in terms of thinking about the idea goals for Dance Kaleidoscope, really thinking about what is the work that you want to see happen around idea internally within the internal culture, because that will inform a lot of the work that happens externally. In my experience, most organizations are much more comfortable thinking about how idea shows up programmatically and is a little hesitant to really do the work that it means to look at itself. And so just want to strongly encourage that for Dance Kaleidoscope.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Lavon. Additional comments or observations by the panel? All right, hearing none, I would ask you to take a couple of minutes to finalize your scores for Dance Kaleidoscope, and then we will move on to the next applicant. Okay, our next application is Embassy Theater Foundation, Inc. And Levon, you are the reader. So whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Looking at the organizational excellence piece, the embassy's organizational activities were clearly defined, very mission driven, and they included clear examples. And I felt that the application offered a very clear articulation of the strengths and areas for opportunity regarding the embassy's current financial status. Moving into the ideas section, I appreciated all the areas of inclusion that were articulated in this section, staff and underserved populations, including rural counties and communities as well. I appreciated the areas where the embassy sees IDEA as a way to strengthen all facets of the organization and how that is reflected in its staff, board, and volunteers. I also appreciated the clear articulation of the embassy's accessibility goals and the steps the organization has taken thus far, and how the organization is considering challenges in that particular area of access as well. Felt like there was clear demographic information provided, but felt like the section could be strengthened overall by including some info about the embassy's commitment to racial equity. Would have loved to hear that pronounced in the same way that I saw it on the website. In terms of artistic quality, I appreciated the information that was provided about both the artistic offerings and educational offerings, particularly the program advisory group and the embassy's support of local talent in Fort Wayne. And regarding community engagement, appreciated learning about the pre and post style surveys that are provided for programs. Appreciated learning about the Embassy Presents programs and those being engagement opportunities for folks at reduced or free rates, and learning about the overarching community collaborations. But I felt this section could be strengthened by noting how the embassy approaches ensuring that those collaborations with community partners are equitable.
Thank you, Levon. I will ask other panelists to share observations around this application.
I'll go ahead and start. I again echo what was already shared. I also appreciate the fact that the Embassy Theater mentioned in their application their historic structure, historic building, and some things you don't have to do in terms of ADA and accessibility, but there are some things that you do have to do. So I appreciate you doing the things that you have to do, but also going above and beyond and making sure that the patrons and clientele can work in an accessible space. I noticed that a couple of times in your application, you mentioned the phrase that you mirror the community. Given that Fort Wayne, I believe, might be the second largest city in the state of Indiana, I want you to spend a little more time, if you don't mind, in your IDEA section to make sure that as you are stating that you're mirroring the community, that you are actually doing that. I don't know that you are, that you're not, because the percentages were not there. You talk a little bit about how you are identifying different avenues where you can do better, but sometimes it's helpful to actually give those results and say that you are mirroring the community by providing opportunities for a certain percentage of that community. So I wasn't sure because it wasn't listed there. I think that's all I'll add. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Deb. Go ahead.
It's really nice when panelists agree on things. And it's almost like we wrote down all the same things similarly. So I also flagged the mirroring comment. While a lot of this was really strong too, one of the things that just hasn't been mentioned yet is in community engagement, also enjoyed hearing about the surveying, but because they had noted about focus groups, which seems like a really important and interesting thing, I wanted to hear a little bit more about that, since most of the content was about surveying, and it seems like focus groups could be really powerful and impactful as an opportunity to hear a little bit more about.
Well, you beat me to it, Deb. I was going to say more direct community engagement for that feedback piece versus just the sort of surveys, more passive, separate approach. I did have one more of a process question to pose. I did note that in the artistic quality section, they demonstrated a clear dedication to artistic quality, but didn't really mention much about the specific educational opportunities available, though those were mentioned in the first section already. So I understood them from the first section, but didn't hear about them again. I don't know if Maya, if you can answer how that should be addressed.
Again, I think I'd send panelists back to the rubric and whether or not the key questions and the evidence is provided to the extent that it meets the rubric, and that's the guidance we share.
Thank you.
Any additional comments or observations? All right, hearing none, I would ask you to take a couple of minutes and finalize your scores for this application. Okay, we will move on to the next application, which is the Evansville Philharmonic Orchestral Corporation. And Josh, you are the reader for that. So whenever you're ready. And you're muted, friend.
Thank you. Still having trouble with that mute button. Okay. So for the organizational excellence section, overall, I thought it offered a nice overview. I recommend providing more detail about the programs and staff rather than just providing them in a list form. This was kind of just a stylistic note for the application. I saw this several times of having things a little bit more in narrative form where possible to explain the context and the impact versus just providing them in a list. And then the financial section, I thought it could be strengthened by including more specific financial details. And the financial capacity that was described is a little concerning given COVID struggles and deficit recovery. But two strengths that I did want to call out in that area were the plan giving committee and the strategic plan implementation that I thought would both help them get on that right track of the capacity aspect. Under IDEA, I thought they really demonstrated a robust and meaningful commitment to IDEA. They had strong and clearly outlined strategic plan goals, partnerships with diverse external organizations, and offer free tickets to children and students, which is always a great way to engage the community, and provided several examples of supporting patrons with individual needs and how they were able to support them in an inclusive way. I thought a way they could strengthen this section would be expanding upon how some of the goals they mentioned in Part C would actually be implemented, and to provide specific demographic details to help illustrate the reach of the organization. I didn't see too much in the way of demographic details, so to help us understand sort of their reach and audience makeup, those would be really helpful to include. Under artistic quality, I thought the application clearly demonstrated the wide array of concerts and programs that they offer, and the application described the commitment to musician quality through the audition process, which was really helpful. One piece here that I felt was missing that could be added to strengthen the application would just be an explanation of the process for continuous improvement and what that looks like at the organization. And then lastly, with community engagement, I thought the strengths of the section included the artistic forum and the specific outreach of Maestro Kalia and the Director of Education and Community Programs. It's great that they're really reaching out directly to connect with the community. I thought this section could be strengthened by offering more formal ways to gather audience input, such as expanding post-concert surveys. I believe it was mentioned that they do them for some concerts. Would love to see that done across the board. And the SWOT analysis and artistic forum were both great examples of ways to engage. And there were also examples of two-way partnerships with both its artist partners and a community partner, which came through very strongly. So I think that's it for me. Thank
you, Josh. Now we'll open it up to the rest of the panel for additional comments. Levon.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to kind of double click on something that Josh brought up. I think in the organizational excellence section, really could have really improved by adding more detail about the things. I mean, all of the things were there, but I just wanted to know a little bit more about them. In regards to the idea section, I think that everything that was laid out was strong enough, but really could have been extremely strengthened, particularly in adding more detail to the goals that are in the strategic plan around the organization's idea efforts. I felt like those goals were so broad that it didn't give a clear idea of what direction that you all were heading in.
Thank you, Levon. Terry.
I'd just like to add to that just one comment. I agree with what Levon is saying, but I do love the language that they used. And I wrote it down. They said, we want to build with the diverse community, not for them. And I think that that's the right attitude to take in working with trying to develop diverse audiences, diverse staff, diverse patrons. So working with as opposed to for.
Great. Additional comments from the panel.
I echo most of those. I'll just add that in the idea section, I think, it might be helpful to seek peer recommendations for generating quantitative data as well, in terms of numbers about how different organizations go about getting that, rather than having the anecdotal information from the board president about what the audiences looked like. And then I thought they had, pretty good examples and community engagement as well that made the response there pretty compelling and a very ambitious amount of programming.
Thank you, Deb. Any additional comments on this application? All right, seeing none, I'll ask you to take a couple of minutes and finalize your scores. All right, looks like folks have wrapped there. So we will move on to our next application, Fort Wayne Ballet. And Terry, you are the reader for that application. So whenever you're ready.
I believe I'm the reader for that. Is that accurate? No, sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
Fort Wayne Civic Theater. Would you prefer? I'm Fort Wayne Ballet, if that's okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You are, Terry. Go ahead.
A couple seconds to click into the right area. In looking at Fort Wayne Ballet, I'll make sure I'm saying it correctly, Fort Wayne Ballet under the area of organizational excellence. I think it's great to have paid performers, so congratulations on that. It looks like your season is eclectic and includes educational outreach, which is also very helpful with the training curriculum that you use with American Ballet Theater. So kudos for that. As it pertains to IDEA, I'm interested in knowing more about the inclusion of the National Dance Institute's curriculum in Fort Wayne as you're doing that. Also interested in knowing what Fort Wayne Ballet has learned from participation in the United Front project. So that kind of takes me to community engagement. I also appreciate the work that this organization is doing with Boys and Girls Clubs. But my question is, are you working with these students to eventually get them connected to and involved in the Fort Wayne Ballet? Just as a reminder, Misty Copeland is a product of the Boys and Girls Club where you are doing your work. And so there may be those folks that you're working with in the community that may be prodigies for the next generation of dancers. Have there ever been any students that have been elevated? It would be great to read that in your application. It may be possible, again, we don't know that if it isn't in the application itself. As far as artistic quality, the ballet company does year-round programming for all levels of students in terms of their school and the company itself. They have a summer intensive and they've received the certification from American Ballet Theater, which means that they are upper echelon, which is great. But I also want to just make sure that, again, what we read in our application, in your application, is what we are giving our scores on, and maybe we missed that because it wasn't included. So I again would just offer that if you do have those types of connections, especially as they pertain to community engagement and IDEA, that you would put that in the application.
Thank you, Terry. I'd open it up for discussion, observation by the other panelists. Deb.
In the idea section, I, did want to, just highlight the disability access, which I thought was helpful in there. That was, they seemed pretty comfortable in that area, which was great. But to Dr. Terry's point too, given the exclusionary history of ballet, I wonder if there was more that they could be doing to fulfill what their mission is to make all feel welcome. And then also, I think having more comfort around being specific about who they're working with and who they're participating with the Boys and Girls Club too. And then in community engagement, again, it was great to hear in their partnership with Gigi's Playhouse, and that partnership that they're doing, that it really did seem like a two-way relationship, and that they shared how, the ballet has learned from that other org and implemented change as a result. So I was happy to hear that kind of thoughtful reflection in that section.
Thank you, Deb. Levon.
Yep. I'll just piggyback off what Deb just said. I really loved both examples that they offered, the Fort Wayne Ballet offered in the community engagement section. And again, what they learned and how they might be offered differently or changed, or how the ballet changed because of those partnerships. I felt like that was excellent and exemplary for other, it can serve as an example for other folks when they're thinking about deep community engagement. In the ideas section, I felt like this section could have been strengthened by talking a little bit more about the goals that the Fort Wayne Ballet has in mind around internal idea work and culture shift. And I appreciated learning about their participation in the United Front program. And I felt like that could have also been strengthened by sharing a few specific examples of the impact of participating in that kind of program. I thought that would have really made that section pop a little bit more.
All right, thank you, Levon. Any addition? Josh, go ahead.
Yes, I just want to add one more comment about idea, because everyone covered, I think, everything else quite thoroughly. and I'm probably repeating, but I agree, want to echo that there's really strong work with working with individuals with special needs and different access needs. I thought that came through really strongly. And there was some discussion of working with economically disadvantaged communities, like that was mentioned with the Boys and Girls Club, but I thought that could be expanded on. And in the actual audience makeup demographic statistics, I didn't see any discussion of racial diversity there or in the artistic decision-making or dance piece selection process. So I think the application could be strengthened by touching on those points as well.
Thank you, Josh. Any additional comments or observations on this application? If not, I would ask you to finalize your scores. And now we're ready to move on to the next application, which is the Fort Wayne Civic Theater, Inc. And Levon, you are the reader for this application.
Yep, I think I got it right this time, Dr. Terry. Sorry about that. Really appreciated learning about the Civic Theater's In the Wing and Project Lights program. Appreciated that you noted that part of the power of live theater is the opportunity for shared experiences. But I felt the organizational excellence section could be strengthened by articulating how encouraging things like empathy can impact theater goers and break down barriers between different groups of people. I really appreciated and thought the depth of info that you all had regarding the economic impact of the Fort Wayne Civic Theater was very strong, and appreciated gaining an understanding about how the Civic Theater paid staff and community contracts for staff work, but I felt the section could be strengthened by a bit more detail about how contract work and how the work with the Civic Theater provides equitable access to community members who are utilizing those opportunities. Felt like that section also had a very clear articulation of the Civic Theater's current financial situation, very easy to follow, and I really appreciated that. In the idea section, I appreciated hearing about how idea was leveraged in multiple and creative ways in some of the productions that were put on in the last few years. I appreciated learning about the organization's current idea statement. And just when I was looking at it, I appreciated learning about it, but I thought it could be strengthened by really getting specific about activities and projects like the programs that were listed that can help you articulate your overarching goals around idea. And given the demographic breakdown of the Civic Theater's patronage provided, the question of what might need to change to accomplish that goal section could have been strengthened by being simply more robust, clearly articulating the ways that you are seeking to shift the overwhelming majority of patronage, which is currently 95% white and non-Hispanic, could be impactful as you think about future applications. Regarding artistic quality, I really appreciated that the internships that you all provide to high school and college students I thought were great. In alignment with your idea goals, I would consider thinking about how to ensure that all of those internships were paid. It was noted that some of them were unpaid, and it will make access to those kind of internship positions more equitable across the board. Regarding community engagement, I appreciated the nod again to the In the Wings and Project Lights, but felt this section could have been strengthened by speaking a bit more about how your community engagement efforts are a two-way mutually beneficial street. It is currently articulated the community engagement efforts feels primarily for the Civic Theater's benefit, and I wanted to ask, how might that become more balanced over time where community members are more embedded in the process of creating equitable partnerships, which again would be more mutually beneficial for both parties.
Thank you, Levon. Love to open it up now for other panelists' comments and responses to this application.
Levon did a really good job.
sign of a good thorough review, right? No additional comments. I don't want to squelch discussion though, so if folks have something they want to add, please chime in. All right. Hearing no additional comments or discussion, I would ask you to take a couple of minutes to finalize your scores for this application. All right, we will move on to the next application, which is the Indiana Repertory Theater. And Deb, you are the reader for this application. So whenever you're ready.
Sure. I thought the in organizational excellence, it was a really solid overview of the organization and its capacity. And its importance going beyond the passive viewing of performances to conversations and providing resources. I appreciated the acknowledgement of the evolution of the board and seems to have a responsive strategic planning in place. There's also good recognition of current financial challenges and budget management. And I was also glad to see that DEI or IDEA work was thoughtfully addressed in this section. They specifically noted that the inclusion series, which was kind of like a separated out, programming decision was no longer going to be distinguished as a separate block of production. And it's now firmly embedded in all of their programming. In terms of IDEA work, it was a really comprehensive and clear response with apparent consistent commitment. I was hoping to have it noted that IDEA training also extended to the board in addition to all the staff. They were very candid in their note on challenges, in terms of the community and intention versus impact, and acknowledging that the work they've done this far hasn't yet made the theater a place that communities of color seek out, and they seem to have some good programs to address this. I'd like to know more stats about the demographics of the intended audiences, if their inclusion programs are successful. I also appreciated their ambassador program to do accessibility, both financial, programmatic, and physical, and then the ongoing updating of IDEA policies and wording. In terms of artistic quality, expertise of those involved was, of course, on par. I appreciated their participation in industry unions, their dual focus on both local and national talent for that kind of exchange. And student performances include post-show discussions. I was happy to see that. It wasn't entirely clear what the process was for continuous improvement in this section, so that could be tightened up a little bit. In terms of community engagement, there was a compelling note about building community trust through the ambassador process, receiving feedback and guidance from a diverse group of community members about the art it makes. There seems to be many programs for community engagement, though the ambassador program seems to be the most thoughtfully represented in this section and demonstrating how it's mutually beneficial. I was happy to see that the ambassadors were paid, which wasn't noted in earlier sections, and that seems to be a key component. So I think, if anything, to make it a little tighter, showing more thoughtfulness in some of the other community engagement partnerships that they have, as much as they do with the ambassadorship, but that is a strong program that I'm glad to see happening.
Great, thank you, Deb. Terry.
I too agree with Deb in terms of the ambassador program. With a historically significant organization like IRT to really focus on allowing or including folks who maybe haven't had a voice in the past, whether they're younger folks or just folks that have not had an opportunity to give feedback. I applaud them for that. I do have a concern in the IDEA section, and I will have to read it because it says, it's the section in IDEA. It says, as a predominantly white institution producing culturally specific stories with and by artists of color, IRT has a responsibility to ensure that it's responding to the local community. The part that actually caught me off guard, I had to come back and read it again, is that predominantly white institution is capitalized. So in my notes, I wrote, why is IRT a predominantly white institution? Are you really a nonprofit theater that has historically catered to a white audience and culture? I don't think that you want to call yourself a predominantly white institution. So please be careful in calling yourself that, and please keep striving for inclusion. You're actually doing that. Your application says that you're doing that, and you're on your way to being a breakthrough theater for that. But I would caution you in using that kind of language in your application.
Thank you, Terry. Josh?
Yeah, I agree with most of my panelists' comments about the various sections. I had a different perspective on the organizational excellence section. After reading through the application a couple times, I was still unclear on what the organization does and what types of theatrical works it produces or presents. I didn't really get a good sense of the work that came out of the organization or the importance of the organization. I didn't feel like that was as clearly articulated. And I didn't also thought the application had a hard time demonstrating its capacity to carry out its work as well as its financial stability, given sort of the more difficult financial times that the organization is finding itself in. So I think those few areas would need to be addressed to strengthen that section.
Great. Thank you, Josh. Additional comments on this application? All right, hearing none, I would ask the panelists to take a few minutes to finalize the scores for this application. And the next application is the Indianapolis Ballet. And Josh, you are the reader for that application.
Okay, wonderful. So the Indianapolis Ballet, let's start with organizational excellence. I thought this was a really strong section. It had a really clear and detailed explanation of what the organization does. It's important. It's clear the organization has a strong financial picture right now, so it has the capacity to carry out its work. Overall, I thought this section was very strong. For idea, again, doing overall some really good work in the idea space. I thought it did a really good job of outlining, here were our 2018-2019 strategic planning goals. This was our process, and that it had to get put on hold because of COVID. But I will note that the application will be strengthened when the organization is able to fully implement those goals that it set out to do about 5 years ago. One example that I thought was really strong of just a way that they're being more inclusive was allowing students to wear tights and shoes in the same tone as their natural skin color. I thought that was a really nice example to call out of a way that they're improving to make it a more inclusive space for their students. Let's see, under artistic quality, this was another strong section with clear commitment to high artistic quality. The applicant clearly described the process for artistic selection and offered both artistic and educational opportunities for students, particularly those from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. I thought the application could be strengthened here with a more detailed explanation of the feedback process for continuous improvement, but otherwise generally described as strong artistic quality. And then under community engagement, again, this was a very strong section. They provided several strong examples of the mutually beneficial two-way partnerships, such as those with Butler University and Indianapolis Public Schools. I really got a sense of what those programs looked like, not just how it benefited their organization, but how that built a stronger relationship with Butler or with IPS and how that worked both ways. So I didn't have any notes in the section of ways to strengthen it.
Great, thank you, Josh. So we'll open the floor to panelists. Levon.
Just given how heavily weighted IDEA is in the application process right now, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things from that with this particular application. I really did appreciate the Indianapolis Ballet's desire to shift the perception of ballet as a strictly Eurocentric endeavor. I think that that's really important for any kind of organization that has existed historically in a way that has marginalized non-white people. But I was really actually disappointed to hear about how the pandemic essentially sidelined the organization's IDEA goals. And I think that as the organization is considering future applications, really building your IDEA goals in a way that they are central to the way that you work, the way that you operate, so that when things, economic hardships or any other challenges that may appear, that the IDEA goals aren't the things that are automatically kind of jettisoned. And I was also slightly concerned that it seemed like much of the forward momentum for the IDEA-based strategy at the board level seemed like it may fall to a new BIPOC board member that is there. And so I would strongly encourage the ballet to consider if there is a way at the board level to ensure that there is broader support for IDEA-based initiatives.
Hey, thanks, Levon. Terry.
I would just echo, as Levon says, double click on on that, and just to be careful in how you are identifying how you work with IDEA efforts. In your application, you said that your marketing materials represent all genders, races, ethnicities, and ages. That probably isn't true. I would say that it probably isn't true because I don't know how many genders, races, ethnicities, and ages there might be. So just to be very careful in how you are identifying things and just be specific in what you actually are doing, because you actually are doing some things. I also appreciate Josh's comment about the tights and the shoes with the skin tone. I would love to know how many. And so again, being specific that you are making that an option and making that available to the dancers, but how many of them have those tights and shoes?
Thank you, Terry. Additional comments, Deb?
Also just wanted to note in the IDEA section, similar to what Levon and Dr. Terry noted, I was pleased to see that both staff and board were participating in the trainings and that they do have a lot of really good efforts, and that there could be a little bit more nuance too in how the section specifically notes the new hires and the new board members or new board member, because it reads a little bit like tokenization. And so I think it can be a little bit more thoughtful in how they're talking about that progress that they're making, because they are making good efforts there.
All right, thank you, Deb. Any additional comments or observations on this application? All right, seeing none, I'll ask you to take a couple of minutes and finalize your scores. And panelists, I want to ask you, do you need a few minute break? I want to make sure that we're respectful of people's need to maybe grab a glass of water. Anybody? Should we take a 4-minute break? Why don't we do that? All right, it is 2:59. For the sake of being precise, we'll reconvene at 3:03. So take a few minutes, take a break, and we'll see you back in a couple of minutes. Welcome back, panelists. We will move on to our next application, which is Minnetrista, and Terry is the reader on that one. Terry, so when you're ready.
Yes, thank you. Minnetrista is, as we know, a space that provides for opportunities for community engagement. And I appreciate that they are a Museums for All member, which allows opportunities for people that may not be able to pay a membership to come to that museum. I also, under the IDEA, note that they have done work to have gender inclusive bathroom facilities with pronoun disclosures, or I think that's nice, that's great. I would also like to see more opportunities for Black, Indigenous, and people of color inclusion that goes beyond the Museum for All membership for low-income families who are not Black, Indigenous, and people of color. I know that there are accommodations that are made for low income, but not all BIPOC people are low income. So it's important to make sure that that is available. In terms of the artistic quality, there are quite a few offerings in terms of artistic experiences for all ages. It would be nice to find out if there are any additional opportunities that relate to Native American history. Just again, in reading the application, wondering if there are opportunities for that to really pull that out, which I didn't see, but that would also increase the BIPOC exposure and experiences in that area. In terms of community engagement, I believe that there are a lot of organizations that use their facility to gather, and I think that is very helpful in that area. And it's a welcoming organization that seems to be very open to collaborating and engaging.
Thank you, Terry. We'll open it up to the panelists for additional comments on this application. Deb, did you have a comment?
Sure. I can add that, the organization did seem to be at the very start of their idea journey. As Dr. Terry mentioned, so the commitment isn't clear there, but they did seem to have a good few notes in there. Let's see. And then in terms of, I just wanted to also recommend to them that they seek peer recommendations. They noted that they don't have staff expertise or resources to collect and identify socioeconomic data for visitors. So that's something that I'm sure another organization could assist them with in terms of how to, easily do that, or not easily necessarily, but do it in a way that's sustainable for them. I did appreciate in artistic quality that they mentioned that they are kind of balancing appealing to their audiences with less tech access in addition to digitizing things. So I appreciated that they're incorporating both of those, knowing their audience well in that way. Let's see. And I think that's it for now.
Okay, thank you, Deb. Lavon.
Yeah, just wanted to note that I appreciate, as Dr. Terry mentioned, I appreciated the organization's involvement in the Museums for All program. Also really appreciated that they'd undergone an IDEA audit in recent years. I think that that's really helpful as a starting place. I did feel the IDEA section of this could be strengthened in the way that I've talked about a little bit here. If making sure that those efforts are happening at the leadership and board level to commit to IDEA, In the application, it seemed like most of the work was staff-based, and even that work was primarily externally facing. And so I just want to encourage all organizations to think about what ideal work looks like when you are starting from the inside out.
Thank you, Levon. Josh.
Yes, and just one note on the organizational excellence section that hasn't been mentioned yet, because I agree with all my fellow panelists so far. I thought that this section could be strengthened by putting the budget in context of what that budget level will mean for the organization and how the financial pressures that they discuss can impact what the organization is able to offer to its community, since it does offer a lot of great opportunities. Otherwise, it was a strong section.
Right. Thank you, Josh.
I'll just note too, in the organizational excellence section, that I appreciated that they it gave context to their geography, not being from the area. It was helpful to understand where they are in the state, as well as a little bit of their surrounding areas and the communities that are around them. That was helpful and helped to strengthen that section.
Okay, thank you, Deb. Any additional comments about this application? All right, hearing none, if you take a couple of minutes to finalize your scores for this application. All right, the next application is Phoenix Theater, and Josh, you are the reader for that application. So when you're ready. Josh, friend, you're muted. It's all right.
Second time today. Okay. Hi, everyone. The Phoenix Theater. Okay, organizational excellence. Let's start there. Again, they had a clear and detailed description of the organization and its importance. I thought this section was very strong. Although the organization is facing a budget deficit, it's a modest deficit in the context of its overall budget, and it noted specific strategies in place to work to overcoming that modest deficit. I think my only note here is that the application will be strengthened when the organization is able to pass a balanced budget moving forward. IDEA, I thought they really had an outstanding commitment to IDEA with a focus on multiple areas. It really spanned the board with racial diversity, fiscal and socioeconomic accessibility, age diversity, and more. They gave several examples of how they're tackling diversity, or IDEA, I should say, from a broad lens, which I really appreciated. Under artistic quality, they provided a detailed explanation of both educational and artistic activities and provided information on continuous improvement, which was really helpful. I thought one opportunity for improvement here to strengthen this section was to share more details about the selection process for artists. I would have been really interested to know more about what that looks like, and didn't see that come through as much. And then for community engagement, I thought they really demonstrated an excellent commitment to community input through feedback and surveys that the organization takes and uses to improve, and provided a few different examples of those mutually beneficial partnerships to really show how that community connection is coming through. So overall, a strong application.
Great, thank you, Josh. Now we'll open it up for other panelist feedback, comments on this application. Levon.
I'll just note that I also felt this was a very strong application overall. Really, each section I thought was pretty exemplary. Again, gonna focus on the IDEA piece because I think that that's this application, I think, is one that could be used as a model for others. Appreciated learning about the board's high participation rate in the facilitated dialogue sessions. Really appreciated the nods to the relevance of power with organizations and the impact of recognizing it towards shifting power to being more equitable in terms of interactions with communities. I really felt like the goals were clearly articulated, and really appreciated learning about the accessibility efforts, as Josh mentioned as well.
All right, thanks, Levon. Dr. Terry.
Well, I was going to have some comments, but Levon was so eloquent. So I'll just say double click.
Deb.
Triple click, same, I won't say a side note, it's not related. Anyway, I'll just go to community engagement. I was a little surprised at that section. There was a good encapsulation of the partnerships there, but I felt like it wasn't, it was a little surprised there wasn't more about how the theater experiences changed as a result of the collaborations, given how nuanced and thoughtful the rest of the application was. It was still a solid response. But I felt like because everything else in the application was so thoughtful in how they're capturing those things, I expected a little bit more from that section, but overall was very solid.
Great. Thank you, Deb. Any other comments anyone wants to add? All right, seeing none, if you'll take a couple of minutes to finalize this application. All right, our next application is South Bend Symphony Orchestra Association, Inc. And Deb, you are the reviewer on this, so whenever you're ready.
Their organizational excellence section was very well defined and mission driven. They have very ambitious programming both in and outside of the venue. Their financial picture is pretty impressive in these times. I was pleased to read that they were able to leverage a big anniversary for their fundraising efforts, and acknowledge that commitment to community engagement work that they've been doing also impacted that surplus. And then I appreciated the snapshot of the larger grant in this section. So they did a good kind of overview of the fuller grant in this section, which I appreciated. In terms of idea, it was a good reflective statement and goals. I wanted to better understand where they're at with the progress towards the goals. They had the years noted within the narrative, but I wasn't clear on if those were when they accomplished the items or is it the goal year of the plan. And then I also wondered who was included in the original EDI committee and if that included non-board members. I was appreciative of the demographic stats of the region and wondered how that compared with the staff, audience, and volunteers of the board. But overall, okay section there. In terms of artistic quality, really clear description of activities and engagement for improvement. I appreciated the emphasis on engaging talent. I put in quotes from away because I used to live in Maine and that's what they said, in the local community and making Indiana home. The pre-concert talk Q&A, the educational program, tying it back to the school curriculum, the free open rehearsals. And in terms of community engagement, I thought this was a really thoughtful and reflective response. And I hoped that the learnings that they had about the community partnership from the Dia de los Muertos project will become a model for the symphony and other collaborations. So they noted that the community engagement began with the community vision, which only then informed the artistic vision. So hopefully that will inform how they collaborate with other organizations. And I thought they had good other examples showing what the symphony learns in the process of engaging with those organizations.
Thank you, Deb. Additional comments, Dr. Terry.
I'd like to further highlight that community engagement. It is exciting to see what the orchestra is doing. I'd like to make a suggestion that when you perform some of the other concerts, because there's a wealth of concerts based on your application that you do throughout the year, that you continue to invite those BIPOC or Black and Indigenous people of color to the other performances, as well as the ones that are specific to that culture, I think it will help to increase and enhance the experience for both sides, or all sides, I should say.
Thank you, Dr. Terry. Other comments, observations on this application? Josh?
Yes, on the ideas section, I thought they had a strong statement on idea, and it's clear they're earlier in their idea journey with the EDI committee forming in 2020, and then they're just now sort of planning for the board to create a similar committee for them to discuss. And I thought it was a genuine interest, though, in really focusing on this idea work, specifically related to the Black and African American community in South Bend and engaging that community, which I think is critical, especially given sort of the context of the organization and where it sits. But I would encourage the organization to also think more broadly about IDEA and what are some other ways, maybe some accessibility needs that aren't being met, that they could really fully build out that type of programming.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Other comments? All right, hearing none, I'll ask the panelists to take a minute or two to finalize their scores. Okay, we will move on now to the Fort Wayne Philharmonic Orchestra, Inc. And Levon, you are the reader for this application, so whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Maya. The organizational excellence section I thought was strong. There were a couple of phrases in here that I think that would be helpful. I think it would be helpful in future applications to talk a little bit more about. It speaks to being accessible and relevant. I would have loved to know a little bit more about how the Fort Wayne Philharmonic defines accessible and relevant, and what ways that goal of being that is currently being lived out. And really had a question in the second section about, like, when you think about relevance and how you defined it, how do you limit barriers to participation, and how do you encourage an inclusive atmosphere? Those were phrases that were there, but it could have been strengthened by teasing those out just a little bit. In the idea section, it states that the board leadership is open, but I'm very interested in what specific ways is the board seeking out diverse candidates, and would have loved to have read about if there's been any sort of assessments done on the board's culture. IDEA is a primary goal in the Philharmonic's strategic plan and in the HR section, and would have liked to hear a little bit more detail about how it's planned to embed that throughout the organization. I really love the inclusion of information about all of the sensory-friendly accessibility work that the Philharmonic is currently doing. I was interested in learning more about the task force on the statement. That is also, I wanted to know if the task force that is currently working on IDEA initiatives, if they are also tasked with an action plan. And right now it seems like a significant amount of the internal IDEA work rests with the Director of Community Engagements. And that role is also heavily designed to deal with external IDEA work. So I would want to see an articulation about how that is going to be balanced in future applications as well. In the artistic quality section, it was clearly discussed the ways that artistic excellence informs the operations regarding the Philharmonic musicians and its youth orchestra. I felt like this section could have been strengthened by more examples of what artistic excellence actually means to the Fort Wayne Philharmonic. With the community engagement section, the assessments that are currently part of the youth engagement and family series, I felt like those were very, very strong. I felt like the process could be strengthened by having community members at the decision-making table in some capacity beyond just the surveys and assessments. and I appreciated the names of the organizations, learning about the organizations that the Fort Wayne Philharmonic currently partners with. That was really helpful in really looking at their overall community engagement. But I felt the section could be strengthened by speaking a little bit more about how those partnerships currently operate. I was wondering what the depth of these partnerships were beyond providing the Fort Wayne Philharmonic with access to more diverse audiences. And I also was found myself wondering, how does the Philharmonic utilize or leverage community voice in developing these partnerships? Again, leaning to what does it mean for these partnerships to be equitable in the sense that they are informed by the community's needs as well.
Thank you, Levon. We'll open it up for additional comment by the panel. Deb.
I also noted those same pieces in the community engagement part, but I'll just flag that in the organizational excellence section that it must have been a huge bummer to write a grant application in the middle of a strike. And I did notice that they have settled it. Not that it affected how I scored that section, but they did write about it in a generally respectful way. And so I appreciated how that nuance of wording in that section too. And yep, that's it.
Thanks, Deb. Additional comments? Josh?
Yes, one additional comment on the idea section. I really like their goal of being an employer of choice. Although it is a bit of a broad goal, I think it would say a lot about the organization, and a lot of different goals probably feed into that to sort of make them be able to achieve that. But then sort of their explanation of how they would go about achieving that goal were a little bit vague, dedicating time and resources and using the new director role to focus on that. So I think the application could be strengthened by really providing specific tactics on how to achieve that goal. And also just a good idea in general, if it hasn't sort of thought through what those specific tactics will be, to kind of put some more language around that plan as it works to achieve that goal.
Thank you, Josh. Any other comments by the panel? All right, hearing none, take a couple of minutes to finalize your scores. Our next application is Wagon Wheel Center for the Arts. And Terry, you are the reader for this application, so whenever you're ready.
Thank you. In the category of organizational excellence, I'm impressed with the way that this organization has the ability to employ college students studying arts-related majors from across the country. It would have been helpful for me to know how you differentiate between the paid staff and the volunteers. I think you listed in your application that you have 100 paid staff and 150 volunteers. But I do remember reading that the college students are paid staff. So congratulations on that. I also really am intrigued by the fact that you are, in terms of IDEA, reaching out to HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, to try to increase the diversity of not only the patrons, but the staff and the students that are coming through your organization throughout the year. I really like the idea of that collaboration that is increasing the hiring and casting for your shows. They seem to be making the organization seems to be making an authentic effort to make a difference for people in the community. So I applaud you. Keep doing that. That's an idea that I hope others will take advantage of also. In terms of artistic quality, I have to tell you that I wrote down this application in the way that it was written makes me want to attend one of their productions. Because it was very vivid. I like how you're taking advantage of professional development opportunities also with the Indiana Youth Institute, which is not an arts organization, but an organization that helps youth serving agencies. So thank you for taking advantage of that. in terms of community engagement, it looks like, again, according to your application, that you're getting community support from several cities and county entities who seem to see the benefit of your organization and for the arts in the community. And you've even reached beyond the county borders to enlist collaborations with colleges and universities. Again, I appreciate you sharing that information. Finally, again, just in terms of how you are doing in terms of artistic quality and organizational excellence, you take performances and put them in the round, and that's not always easy to do. So again, kudos to you for the work that you're doing with your organization.
Thank you, Dr. Terry. Additional comments from panelists on this application? Deb.
Just a couple of notes. I thought all 4 sections were really strong. In the idea section, just a recommendation that, HBCUs are a good fit for partnership, but I also wondered if there might be regional colleges with specific student groups where developing relationships may come a little bit more easily, and that they could create, some sort of mutual beneficiality in partnership there. In terms of community engagement, is that what I was going to talk about? No. I don't know what I was going to talk about. I'm sorry, everybody.
That's okay, Deb. We'll move on to Levon, and if it comes
Yeah.
to you, just jump
Yeah.
in. Levon, I think you were going to make a comment.
I was just going to say, really enjoyed reading this this application. Felt like it was strong in each section, and would lift it up as a potential model for future application processes.
Great. Deb, did you think of it?
I did. I was just
Good.
going to note that I was pleased with how in the community engagement section that there's, it was a really succinct response, but it was a strong one with an emphasis on what the organization gleans rather than its charitability, which in its nuance works well here.
Great. Thank you, Deb. Josh.
Yes, I just had a couple suggestions on the idea section. I thought the application could be strengthened with a more nuanced breakdown of annual household income. The range they offer is 50 to 100,000, which is a very large range. So to really understand the community they're serving and whether it's a socioeconomically disadvantaged community, I would suggest stratifying that a bit more. And then also trying to continue their survey. They did recently send one out in January 2023, but it looked like the participation rate was pretty low, of 252 out of 10,000 folks, or about 2.5%. So if this continues in future years, I would suggest trying to market it as much as possible to make sure that it's a fully representative sample to know what the audience looks like in order to then inform the idea work going forward.
Great. Thank you, Josh. Any additional comments or observations by our panelists? Seeing none, I'd ask you to take a minute or two and finalize your scores for this application. I want to thank our panelists. This concludes this FY24 Arts Organization Support Advisory Review Panel. Applicants will be notified of the status of their grant application following the Indiana Arts Commission quarterly business meeting in June. Thank you so much. Thanks, a big thanks, a huge thanks to our panelists for their support of this process. And thank you again for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your day.